Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 109 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and tonight we are previewing Week 6 for Big Ten football. Joe, an interesting slate here. Let's start off in your neck of the woods, Ann Arbor, Michigan, for big noon kickoff. Wisconsin coming down to Ann Arbor to play the number 20th ranked Michigan Wolverines. As the YouTube viewers can see here, very, very big spread favored towards the Wolverines. Minus 16.5 coming off a bye for Michigan. Joe, what are you looking for here?
Yeah, probably the worst big dude kickoff of the year so far, perhaps for the rest of the year, unless, they somehow put UCLA in there. But getting back on track here, the only real matchup Wisconsin has a severe advantage in potentially is the defensive line. They've been very good at stopping runs, both against Alabama and Maryland, who I say, especially Alabama after this weekend, have very good rushing attacks and good play calling. I think that just means Michigan's going to have to be creative. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to air it out because Michigan couldn't air it out to save their lives at this stage, but it probably means more Bryce Underwood options, more runs with receivers such as Samaj Morgan, perhaps quicker screen passes to kind of keep the D line guessing and Luke Fickle guessing. But Sean, whether it's Billy Edwards, Danny O'Neal in this, the only way Wisconsin really, really wins this game is if their offense scores over 20 points. And based on their latest performances, I don't see that as very likely, nor do I find it likely that they're going to completely shut down Michigan's offensive attack. Uh, I'll give my prediction here, Sean, because I don't want to rant too much on this game because I think aside from being big noon, it's not that interesting a matchup. I think Michigan's probably going to air it out a bit. I think they're going to have to slow down. I think Wisconsin might have to commit a few guys to the Michigan tight ends, Klein, who's definitely healthy, and Hanson, who might potentially be out. But regardless, I think Michigan doesn't cover but wins probably a pretty boring, like 27-13 type of game.
Yeah, Wisconsin's coming off a pretty bad home loss to Maryland where they were, thoroughly outplayed. Both teams coming off a bye. Just for me, this is not a close game if Michigan doesn't stub their toe. And Sharon Moore is back for this one. We'll see if they resort to the, there's definitely been a shift in play calling since the Wisconsin game or Oklahoma game. And I think if they play an average offensive game, this is a 14-point win. The only way Wisconsin hangs around is if Michigan doesn't come to play offensively, aren't sharp, maybe a turnover that leads to some points. But I'm looking for Michigan to win this one by a lot. This is if you want to be in the college football playoff conversations, this is a 30-10 victory at home in front of your fans, and nothing is pointing the other direction for me. So I'm going Michigan 30, Wisconsin 10. All right, Joe, Big Ten Network. We've got the Illinois Fighting Illini coming off a big win against USC, going against Purdue, who sits at 2-2, still looking for their first Big Ten win. The Fighting Illini minus 9.5 right now. The last trip to the Hoosier State did not go so well for the Fighting Illini. Hopefully for them, this one goes better.
Yeah, I think definitely at least a slight drop down in opponent quality between Indiana and Purdue. I think Ryan Brown's actually and Coach Odom have done a really good job for the Boilermakers this year. I think there's clear improvement among the program, recruiting, and I think culture-wise, you get a guy like Devin Mockabee who's now been there through three coaching regimes, getting him to stay and perform very well, I'd say, for that offense is definitely a positive for Coach Odom. In terms of this game, I'm kind of interested that the spread isn't that much. I think people respect Purdue's offensive acumen. I think Ryan Brown is a really good playmaker. I think he's going to get even better as he matures. Only a sophomore right now, probably has 2 or 3 years of eligibility left should he choose to use it at Purdue. I think it's just a program in development. And I
Yep.
think a win like this could really jumpstart the program. I just don't think it's going to come against Illinois. I think the combination of Altmaier, Coach Bielema, Caden Fegan, there's too many certainties that I know you can roll your eyes that a team that lost by 53 2 weeks ago has a lot of certainties. But after the USC performance, I think this is a program, and it's been this way since 2022. It's a very consistent program. They have solid QB play most of the time, solid enough defense, and very good coaching. To me, that doesn't scream that they're going to get upset on the road by a Purdue. I think Purdue's still a jump-started operation, and Illinois is kind of more like a seasoned baseball team. Probably not the most talented, but enough veterans where they're not going to lapse in judgment or create any plays that could allow Purdue to hang around in this game. So I think Illinois probably wins this game, Sean. I think Purdue does have moderate success scoring, but I think Illinois wins this game 35-20.
Purdue for me has already shown a lot of improvement, sort of just in the culture. Like they're not going to lay down and get destroyed like they did 5 or 6 times last year. They were obviously going to lose to Notre Dame very early on there, and they didn't give up. They ended up scoring 30 points. I could see this game going similar to that one, just not as much of a deficit. Like Illinois is up 13-0 in the second quarter, and then the score ends up being I'm going to go Illinois 33, Purdue 23. Don't think it'll be a very close game. Coming off last week for Illinois, there are still things to work on. They had 2 red zone fumbles. Defensively, they still gave up 30-plus points. So I don't think Illinois is going to come in here being complacent. This game also last year, Joe, was 50-49 or something along those lines. At Illinois, Purdue almost won, and that Purdue team was probably equivalent to this year's UCLA. So I don't think Illinois is going to take this game lightly. I see them rolling relatively easy here. But on the other hand, I don't think Purdue gives up and loses this one by 30-plus. I think they're going to battle. They're going to scrap for every single point, even if it doesn't really make a big impact on the final score. But, all right, down we go, Joe, to the Rose Bowl, 3:30 p.m. on CBS. We've got the Nittany Lions coming off that devastating loss at home to Oregon in double overtime, where they go to play the 0-4 UCLA Bruins. Penn State nearly 4 touchdown favorites here, Joe. Not really a better spot for a bounce-back win than this one.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of seems like an NCAA game where you're just going to try to stat pad and go crazy. And I think an angry Penn State team can definitely do that. UCLA has shown little ability to stop elite running backs, especially Singleton and Allen. And I know you can criticize both their performances last weekend. I doubt both these guys are going to be off again, especially against a significant drop down in competition. What I'd like to see in this game is Drew Aller just get more comfortable with these receivers passing on third down. I think UCLA, in terms of opponent quality, is equivalent to the first 3 opponents Penn State had. So I think it's completely possible they test it out. They try to get Drew not his confidence back, but Drew more familiarity, mainly with this receiving room. I think, Tyler Ward, we predicted missing him would be a big deal. It's certainly as big a deal as we thought, and then some. Uh, Sean, I'll put it to you this way. If this game is close in any way, I think we got to ask a lot of questions about Penn State. I'd be really shocked, even if Nico Amalivia turned into Superman. I think Penn State should run away with this game. I got the Nittany Lions winning this one 41-14, probably just covering the spread. I'm not convinced UCLA will be in this game by halftime. If they are, perhaps something. But my advice to Penn State, make this a blowout early, test out some things, get out your frustrations, and then get out of there.
Yep, I think this is the perfect spot for them to do so. I think they're, you failed their last 3 drives before the interception in that Oregon game were really good. I think that sort of carries over into this one. I think it's over quickly. I'm going Penn State 52, UCLA 7. All right, Joe, the other game at 3:30, which is sort of a big game in the pecking order here in the Big Ten. On the Big Ten Network, Washington flies across the country to play Mike Locksley and the 4-0 Maryland Terrapins in College Park. Washington coming off that loss to Ohio State at home. Maryland coming off of a bye. And before then, they went on the road in Madison and took care of Wisconsin. So, Joe, I think we're going to find out here if Maryland's for real, and we're going to find out if Washington can bounce back from an unfortunate letdown.
Yeah, I think this is, just more of a light light note. Malik Washington's the QB for Maryland playing Washington. DeJuan Williams is the running back for Maryland, not to be confused with Damon Williams, who's been, I think, aside from the Ohio State game, an excellent quarterback for Washington thus far. So kind of just funny note there. Getting into the football, though, Sean, I think Washington's weapons are a little more seasoned than Maryland's, which is why you're seeing like about a touchdown spread across all books. I think Maryland has to use the formula Ohio State did to stop Washington's offense, which is to first limit both run games, which is Damon Williams's legs as the quarterback and then Jonah Coleman's. I find that it'll be very difficult for them to do this. I think their defense has definitely taken strides. This is by far going to be their biggest test and probably their hardest test uh, thus far. And I mean hardest test, like you're going from, you know, pre-algebra seventh grade to calculus AB in 11th or 12th grade. So this is going to be really difficult for Maryland to stop Washington's offense. And I think the way to combat that is Malik Washington and Mike Locksley are going to have to jump on Washington early. I think you catch them at a somewhat awkward time, 3:30. I think it's more than fine for Washington. But if you could catch Washington a little drowsy or lousy at the beginning and get an early lead, I think Maryland could really have something. But I think unless Maryland jumps on them early, I think Washington's an experienced enough team, even in spite of some of their line problems, where they could figure this one out, hit enough big plays. And I think this game is going to be one where Maryland rallies late and comes up just a play short. So I'm going to have Washington winning this game, Sean, by a score of 27-25.
I think Washington. It's unfortunate for Maryland that Washington sort of had a poor performance last week. I think they're going to come in. I think they're going to be sharp. I think this is just a little bit of a. There's levels to this for Maryland. They've been really solid so far, and I think they are not comfortably in the middle of the pack, but not in the bottom. They're in the middle of the pack as of now. I just think with Washington last week, like they need to get back on track. I think they still do have a really good offense. I think they do come in here and they win. I'm gonna go 35-28 Washington. I think it's a solid performance from Maryland all around, but with how I think there'll be a really big week of execution in practice for Washington. I just can't really see them with the explosive weapons they have laying another egg offensively. So I think they'll score a bunch of touchdowns, and I think it'll be sort of one. Maryland will come one stop short from winning this one. All right, also 3:30 on BTN, probably BTN Plus. Louisiana Monroe heads up to Chicago to play Northwestern. Northwestern 10-point favorites, Joe. A good opportunity for the Wildcats to get a win.
Yeah, I think Preston Stone just got to continue the solid play. I think, probably looking for a step up in performance, especially in the second half comparative to the UCLA game. But Sean, without knowing too much about University of Louisiana Monroe, this is a game Northwestern should just treat as if they're a typical Big Ten team. Get ahead early, stay ahead, and then keep just getting insurance points. I think Northwestern probably wins this one 24-14, some unspectacular score, probably right around that spread, and gets to 3-2. Which, by the way, for Northwestern, that's no light task. They can get it to 3-2. I think they can't drop any more games that they're going to be favored in, and they're going to have to steal one or two to make this interesting for bowl eligibility.
Yep, Louisiana Monroe did play Alabama already this year, and the Crimson Tide won that one 73-0. So Northwestern has a good opportunity for a win here. They did win their other three games. They did beat Arkansas State, who isn't terrible, but they have their hands full here. But yep, Northwestern 27, UL Monroe 13 for me. This is, again, we talked about it last week, Joe. Northwestern doesn't have a ton of chances for wins this year, so they have to get up for the ones that they do. And I see them getting to 3-2 here. All right, 4 o'clock on Fox Sports 1, we've got Michigan State going on the road to play Dylan Raiola and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Both teams coming off of a bye here in search of their first Big Ten win. Joe, what are you looking for in this one?
This is probably my most interesting game of the week, and maybe you could say they're both unranked, but I think these are two really good offenses led by two really good and improved second-year starting QBs. I am shocked the line is 10.5 to 11.5, which is what I've been seeing most of today. I think it's down to 10.5, whatever. But to me, there's clear weaknesses that each team's going to attack. For Nebraska, I think their passing attack did really well against Michigan. I think it would have done even better had they protected Dylan Raiola and not allowed him to be sacked about 7 times. Michigan State's rushing capability is nowhere near Michigan's. That's not even an insult. That's just a fact. You can look at all the stats and look at the gameplay, and you can make your own judgment. But I think if Michigan State doesn't find a way to counter Dylan Raiola and send different blitz packages and frankly give him a lot of time to throw, he's going to tear the secondary apart if Dylan Raiola is anywhere close to on, which he was against Michigan in spite of being off schedule a lot of the time. Um, Nebraska's passing attack's been phenomenal all season. USC is known for their passing attack. They had kind of a field day without Michigan State, even without a Jacoby Lane. Now, flip it over to the Spartans. I think there's a clear opportunity to establish the run here. I think Bryce Underwood and the Michigan rushing attack exposed how vulnerable Nebraska's rush D can be at times if they don't commit extra guys. And committing extra guys against Michigan State's going to be a hefty price with McCree. With McCray, uh, clearly Nick Marsh, Jack Velling, and then Makai Frazier, who I think could get open in the running game. I think Michigan State should look into that. But if they have a three-pronged attack here, I think they can keep Nebraska and the defensive coaching staff for the Huskers guessing all afternoon. I think this game could be really, really entertaining. Sean, I'm
Yeah.
excited. I think Nebraska's going to have to, get pressure after Childs. I think they have way better capabilities to do that than Michigan State does. So I'll give the Huskers the slight edge. I think what it's going to come down to is turnovers and who could limit the other team to field goals, because I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this one.
Yeah, that's my takeaway from this one. I think there will be a lot of points. I think both coaching staffs might be okay with that. Nebraska had a good passing game against Michigan, like you said. They haven't exactly installed the run yet. And then on the other side of the ball, they are not a very good run defense. I think they're going to have to try and stop Michigan State on the run, whether it's Childs or handing the ball off. You might have to live with a little bit of single coverage on some of Michigan State's playmakers, which I think Childs will take some shots. He'll probably have a couple bombs. He'll probably have a couple interceptions. And I think Raiola might be the same. Like, this is a game that could get up there in points. I really think so. I think that's how Michigan State wins, is a crazy 40-35 game that is just back and forth and back and forth. But in terms of Nebraska, if you can control the time of possession, if you can make Michigan State's defense tired, and keep Michigan State's offense off the field, don't let them get in a rhythm, really, I think that will be the key for Nebraska. I think I have them winning this game, Joe. The spread is a lot. I think the over 51.5 is probably a better play here, but Nebraska, I'm going to go 38, Michigan State 31.
Wow, that's close to mine. And one quick thing, what's going to be the deciding factor for me, because I really think this is closer to a coin flip if this was on a neutral field than most think.
Yeah.
Nebraska's counter against Michigan State's pass defense. I think their corners have been outstanding. Sierra Wright, probably one of the better DBs in all of college football. I think that's what's going to make the difference in this game. I think Michigan State's going to have to be really creative play calling wise. I think obviously Joe Rossi's going to have one of his better games as a defense coordinator for Michigan State and find ways to pressure Raiola. I don't give Michigan State as good a chance just because I think two of their pronged attack on offense is going to be countered by the really good Nebraska secondary. So with that said, I'm going to have Nebraska winning a really, really tight game. I have the Cornhuskers also 38, but to Michigan State's 35. I think Matt Rule learns his lesson from the Michigan game, takes the points somewhere in the second quarter. I think those points end up being the difference. 38-35 Nebraska.
Yeah, both teams coming off of a bye and then a loss where they were outplayed the week before, so I think we could see some motivation, some execution, and this is, to me, Joe, this is probably the best game in terms of maybe Maryland, Washington, but this will be one that's probably lost in the slate in the grand scheme of things nationally, being on Fox Sports 1 to 4 o'clock, but it will probably be one of the more entertaining games of the weekend if the the game script goes how we think it will, and we've certainly gotten the game script right, whether our predictions end up being slightly wrong or not. The game scripts have been pretty much as we expected this year. All right, Big Ten Saturday night, the last one of the slate. Minnesota goes on the road to the Shoe to play number 1 Ohio State. 23.5 points for the Buckeyes. That is certainly a lot. Minnesota, definitely going to be a really tough game for the Golden Gophers. We're recording this earlier in the week, so we don't know the status of Darius Taylor. I'd expect him to play in this one. But Joe, Ohio State seems like a juggernaut. I don't know if this game is going to be close.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Ohio State, and I'm not even talking win-loss, is just can you get this offense? Can you find your elite running back? Can you find some more balance in the passing attack? I think Sayed really came on toward the second half of last week, uh, looking elsewhere besides number four. And by the way, looking at just number four is not really the worst option either, I might say. But I think if they could bury their attacks through the air and then establish a running game, whether it's through Jackson Peoples or maybe they could establish something with a Cardell Tate around the edge a lot. Something Urban Meyer did really well with the Paris Campbell, Curtis Samuel. Really, I think Ohio State has so many weapons, and I don't think they've even exposed them. So maybe this is a game they experiment with those. I think that's going to be the really only intriguing part of this game, aside from a spread cover. Buckeyes, I think, win this one. Nothing crazy ugly, but I think it's an efficient 38-13 victory for the Buckeyes.
I'm going 30-13. I think their defense is elite, and I think their offense is good enough. I think we'll see a little bit of a step up in execution for the Buckeyes here. They haven't, don't believe, their lack of scoring has definitely kept them in the game a little bit longer than it probably should have against some of these teams. Like, they still only did score 14 against Texas. Now they didn't give up a point for 57 minutes, so they were going to always win that they were always going to win that game. But that Ohio game was a little bit closer than it probably should have been because of a couple of possessions that weren't scores. They only end up with 24 at Washington. Now their defense is so good that game wasn't close either, but I feel like there will be a time where a team gets 20 against them, and if it's a punt return or a fumble or something to help them get a score, and then they get another one. So I'm looking for Ohio State to get to 30 here. I think that's a good goal. I think Minnesota will have to play really well to get to 10, honestly, but Ohio State 30, Minnesota 13 for me. All right, Joe, that is all we have for the Big Ten Week 6 slate. Please be sure to check out our Week 6 recap when it comes out early next week. Thanks for tuning in.